The moment my fiancé humiliated me at our wedding altar, I knew I would never cry for him, but I would make sure he paid for it. My name is Mara. That day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. White dress, soft music, friends and family filling the church. I stood at the front, hands shaking, heart racing, waiting for the man I thought loved me. Ethan. The man I trusted, the man I defended, the man I was about to marry. I had ignored the small signs for years, the jokes at my expense, the way he talked over me, the way he smiled when people laughed at something I said. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself love meant patience. I was wrong. The ceremony had just started. The priest asked if anyone had something to say before the vows. It was supposed to be routine, a quiet moment. Ethan laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a soft one, a loud laugh. People turned toward him, confused. Then he took the microphone from the priest. "I should be honest," he said, smiling. "I almost didn't go through with this." My heart dropped. Some people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. "It's just," he continued, looking straight at me, "Mara isn't exactly what I'd call a catch." The room went silent. I felt heat rush to my face. My ears rang. I couldn't move. "She's sweet," he said, shrugging, "but let's be real. Without me, she wouldn't be here. No career, no connections. I basically built her." Someone gasped. My mother stood up. My father clenched his fists. Ethan wasn't done. "But don't worry," he said, laughing again. "I'll take care of her. Someone has to." That was it. That was the moment something inside me died and something else was born. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I smiled. I slowly took off my ring and placed it on the table beside me. "I won't be needing this," I said calmly. Ethan looked confused now, annoyed. "Relax," he said. "Can't you take a joke?" I leaned closer so only he could hear me. "No," I whispered, "but I can finish one." I walked out of the church alone. Cameras followed me. Whispers filled the air. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the car. But I didn't answer anyone. Because as I sat there, hands steady, heart cold, I remembered everything Ethan didn't know. He didn't know the company he worked for was built on a fragile lie. He didn't know whose idea had saved his last promotion. He didn't know whose name was quietly listed on key documents, and he definitely didn't know how patient I could be. I had helped him rise, and now I would watch him fall. Not with anger, not with noise, but legally, publicly, completely. That wedding wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his.
"Everyone gather around, it's time for dinner." That's what my mother said, smiling at everyone except me. I could see it in the corners of her eyes, the judgment, the disdain, the unspoken message that I was always less than. My kids, little Emma and Liam, held my hands tightly, looking up at me with excitement and curiosity. They didn't understand yet. They were too young to grasp the family politics I'd been navigating all my life. I forced a smile and said, "Yes, Mom, we're coming." The room was beautifully set, every fork and knife in perfect order, sparkling glasses, candles lit, the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread filling the air. But the warm setting was a mask, a carefully curated illusion of family unity. I knew better. I'd seen it before, at birthdays, at Thanksgiving, at other dinners. Appearances mattered more than hearts. The moment we walked in, my mother's eyes scanned the room, resting on my sister Sarah and her 3 kids who were already seated. "Everyone, the kids should eat first," she announced. And then she glanced at me, almost as if daring me to protest. I froze. I wanted to scream. My children, innocent and hungry, were being told to wait for food while my sister's kids devoured theirs. My face burned with anger, but I didn't want to ruin this moment with a scene. I had learned that patience and observation were the most powerful tools. My kids didn't deserve to see their mother lose control. So I took a deep breath, knelt down and whispered to Emma and Liam, "It's okay. We'll eat soon. Let's wait for the best part." Emma frowned, but trusted me. Liam, as usual, didn't fully understand. He just held my hand and smiled. That smile, it gave me strength. As my kids waited, my sister leaned over, smirking. "Your kids are so quiet. I'm surprised they can wait." Her tone was dripping with condescension. It was subtle, but I felt the weight of it. I replied calmly, "They're polite and patient, something I've tried to teach them." Sarah chuckled, the kind of laugh that fills a room with annoyance. Polite and patient? That's a good way to describe being ignored. I felt a sharp pang. Yes, she knew. She always did. My sister thrived on superiority, on making everyone around her feel smaller. But today, I decided things would change. This was the moment my children would see that their mother would never let anyone step on her or them. Dinner continued, and I observed every interaction, every glance, every whisper. My parents talked mostly to Sarah and her 3 kids, asking about school projects, after-school activities, and little trivial things that seemed designed to make me feel excluded. They asked nothing about Emma's new drawing or Liam's first football practice. I smiled politely and let them think their tactics were working. Inside, a fire burned. I made a silent promise. They would regret every moment they tried to humiliate my children or me. After what felt like an eternity, the main dishes were served. I watched Sarah's kids pile their plates high. My children's stomachs rumbled quietly beside me. I leaned down. "Okay, Emma and Liam, let's eat. Enjoy." The children's eyes lit up. Finally, the table was ours. My mother's face froze. She had expected me to follow her rule, to wait obediently, to let my kids suffer silently. Instead, I had broken her unspoken order with nothing but calm authority. Sarah's smirk faltered. "Well, that's different," she said, trying to mask the irritation. I said nothing. I served Emma and Liam first, making sure their plates were full and their portions generous. Every bite they took felt like a quiet victory. But my revenge wasn't just about this moment. No, that would have been petty. My revenge was about long-term strategy. Every insult, every slight, every time they tried to make me feel inferior, I would respond, not with anger, but with results. Later that evening, after the dinner, my parents asked if we could stay for dessert. I agreed, but only if Emma and Liam had first choice. Once again, I watched their surprise as my children picked the flavors they wanted, ignoring Sarah's protests. I kept my voice calm, my demeanor serene, but inside I was calculating. Every interaction, every word, every slight was a thread I could weave into a plan. That night, after putting Emma and Liam to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a notebook in hand. I started listing everything. The insults, the manipulations, the patterns of favoritism. I wrote every detail down. This wasn't about revenge for its own sake. This was about protection. Protecting my children from being used as pawns, protecting myself from being ignored, and ensuring that those who underestimated me learned a lesson. I also thought about finances. My sister's family lived beyond their means. My parents were always willing to bail her out. That could change. My career had been growing quietly, steadily. It was time they realized that I wasn't just the ignored daughter anymore. I had power, influence, and the ability to make decisions that could affect them directly. I planned small, strategic moves. Next family dinner, I would introduce boundaries. Then I would slowly assert control over financial decisions that affected both sides. The key wasn't confrontation. It was leverage, calm and precise. As I plotted, a thought struck me. The real power wasn't just in money or control. It was in perception. If they saw me as weak, they would attack. If they saw me as untouchable, they would hesitate. I needed to become untouchable. The next day, I began executing small steps. I made sure my children were thriving, enrolled them in activities that showcased their talents, and documented their achievements. I also reached out to professionals, lawyers, financial advisors, quietly, making sure every potential vulnerability was protected. By the time the next family event rolled around, my presence was different. I wasn't just another relative to be overlooked. I was a force. A mother who would not allow her children to be used. A woman whose life wasn't dictated by favoritism. And deep down, I knew something crucial. The humiliation my parents tried to impose that night at the dinner table had sparked something within me. Not anger, not vengeance, but clarity. I knew exactly who I was, what I wanted, and how to achieve it. It was only the beginning. I closed my notebook and looked at Emma and Liam sleeping peacefully in their room. A smile crept across my face. My children would grow up knowing strength, patience, and resilience, not fear. And one day, when the time was right, my family would learn the cost of underestimating the woman who refused to be ignored. Because while they controlled appearances, I was building reality. The night ended quietly, but the war had only just begun. The morning after that tense dinner, I woke up with a sense of purpose. My children were still asleep, and the house was quiet. I sipped my coffee, thinking about the night before. Their little faces had looked at me with trust, with love, expecting me to protect them. That trust was sacred. I couldn't let anyone tarnish it again. Not my sister, not my parents, not anyone. I opened my laptop and began organizing everything. My children's schedules, my work commitments, and most importantly, a timeline of every slight, every condescending remark, every instance where my family had tried to undermine me. I wrote it all down, everything. Names, dates, words, moments. I wasn't keeping score for revenge's sake alone. I was creating armor. Later that week, my mother called. "Can you come by?" she asked, her tone syrupy, trying to mask something I knew well, manipulation. I took a deep breath. "I'll think about it," I replied. She tried to guilt me, reminding me of my responsibilities as a daughter, but I had learned to recognize guilt for what it was, a weapon, and I refused to let it pierce my resolve. Meanwhile, my sister continued her subtle jabs. During a phone call, she said, almost casually, "I hope your kids are adjusting well. It must be hard, sometimes, for them to wait, to understand family dynamics." I let it slide, outwardly, but inwardly I documented every word, every condescending tone, every attempt to belittle me through my children. That week, I began taking action. First, I adjusted the kids' schooling. I enrolled them in a new, prestigious program, one that focused on excellence, discipline, and exposure to strong, independent thinkers. It wasn't just about academics. It was about confidence, about teaching them that no one's favoritism or prejudice could determine their value. Next, I turned my attention to financial security. I quietly met with my advisors and restructured investments. Accounts were set up, trusts created, and every potential attempt by my family to influence or manipulate our lives legally blocked. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was building leverage for the future. The next family gathering came sooner than I expected. My mother insisted it be at her house so everyone can feel at home. I agreed, but with conditions. My kids would eat first. I wouldn't be manipulated, and I would remain calm, composed, and observant. The night arrived. My sister's family arrived first, as expected. My parents smiled warmly at them, their pride obvious. I arrived last, holding Emma and Liam's hands firmly. Their eyes sparkled, unaware of the silent war about to unfold at the dining table. I noticed the shift immediately. My mother's smile was forced, my father's polite nods had an edge of caution, and Sarah, she seemed unsettled, though she tried to mask it with a casual smirk. Dinner began. I made sure my children's plates were full, nutritious, and well presented. Emma and Liam ate first, as planned. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, my father's jaw tensed, and Sarah's smirk faltered. I didn't speak. I simply let the moment sink in. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that I had reclaimed control. Conversation turned to politics, school, and trivial family news. I participated when necessary, subtly steering discussions, dropping small hints of my growing influence and independence. My sister tried to undermine me, mentioning my recent projects, questioning my capacity to manage multiple responsibilities. I smiled politely. "Everything's under control," I said, and continued. Each word, calm and confident, chipped away at the invisible pedestal they had built for themselves. After dinner, dessert arrived. My mother tried to place the tray closer to Sarah's kids first, but I subtly moved it toward Emma and Liam. My sister's expression hardened. "You're bold," she whispered under her breath. I leaned closer, matching her tone. "I'm careful," I said softly. By now, I had noticed a pattern. My family's power depended on invisibility. They thrived on me being quiet, on my kids being ignored. Now that I was visible, aware, and assertive, their old tactics were failing, and they knew it. Later that evening, my mother approached me privately. "I think you're being too harsh," she said. "Family should be about unity." I nodded slowly. I agree, but unity doesn't mean ignoring reality. It doesn't mean teaching children that some are more deserving than others simply because of favoritism. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't respond further. The next few weeks were a test. My sister attempted small manipulations, asking favors, implying that she was stressed and needed help. My parents subtly tried to influence decisions regarding family events. Each time, I responded with calm, firm boundaries. I never lost my temper, I never over-explained, I simply acted decisively and legally, making sure that any attempt to interfere was documented and countered effectively. I also focused on building Emma and Liam's confidence. They began participating in activities they had never been encouraged to try before. Debate clubs, piano lessons, soccer. They thrived. And every time they returned home excited about a small victory, I felt a sense of triumph. My children were growing stronger, independent, and resilient, the exact opposite of the lessons my sister and parents had been trying to teach them. One evening, I received a message from Sarah. "You're making it hard for everyone. Can't we just be normal?" I smiled and typed back, "Normal is respecting each other. We're learning." Her response never came. Meanwhile, the leverage I had quietly been building was growing stronger. I had established a separate fund for my children, investments that my parents couldn't touch, legal safeguards, and a growing network of friends and professionals who understood the dynamics at play. By the end of the month, I realized something important. This wasn't just about meals or dinners anymore. It was about respect. It was about teaching my children, and indirectly my family, that actions have consequences. Ignoring, belittling, and manipulating would no longer be tolerated. I began planning my next strategic moves. The family would have to adjust to a new reality, one in which I had control, not just over my children, but over the narrative itself. Every slight, every attempt at favoritism, every dismissive comment would now be met with firm boundaries, strategic responses, and quiet but undeniable consequences. By the time the next holiday approached, the shift was noticeable. My sister, my parents, even extended family began to treat me differently, not with open hostility, but with cautious respect. They weren't happy about it, and that was fine. I didn't need their approval anymore. I needed their understanding. We were no longer in the same dynamic. As I tucked Emma and Liam into bed that night, I whispered, "We're stronger now. You'll never have to wait because someone else is chosen first. You are always first in my heart and in life." And for the first time, I felt a calm certainty. This was only the beginning.
because I knew that the real revenge and the real lesson would come not through anger, not through shouting, but through quiet, unshakable power. And I was ready.
The next few weeks were a quiet storm. My family still didn't fully understand that the days of taking advantage of me were over. Every phone call, every message, every gathering became a test of boundaries, and I had sharpened mine to perfection. It all began one Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen making breakfast for Emma and Liam when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Can you come over? Your father and I want to talk," she said. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I glanced at my children, who were laughing over pancakes. Their joy reminded me of why I had to be strong, why I couldn't give in to manipulation. "Sure," I finally replied. "Give me an hour." When I arrived, the tension was palpable. My father's arms were crossed, my mother's smile strained, and my sister, of course, had found a way to make her presence known even when she wasn't in the room. The conversation began politely. At first, it was small talk, how my children were doing, updates about work, but the undertone was clear. They were trying to probe to see if I had softened. My sister leaned forward suddenly. "You've done well for yourself," she said, her words coated in a thin layer of sarcasm. "But sometimes success can make people forget what really matters. Family matters." I smiled calmly, letting her words hang in the air. "Family does matter," I said softly, "but respect matters more." Her eyes narrowed. My father coughed, trying to regain control of the conversation. "We're just trying to help you. You know that," he said. I nodded slowly. "I understand," I replied, "but help has a way of becoming control if it isn't balanced, and my family doesn't control me. I've learned that the hard way." There was a pause. My mother's lips tightened. My sister looked furious, but tried to hide it. This was exactly the reaction I had anticipated. Over the next hour, they tried various tactics: flattery, guilt, veiled threats. Each time, I responded with patience and logic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply observed, documented, and subtly reminded them that I had the power now. After they left, I sat down with Emma and Liam and explained, in age-appropriate words, why boundaries were important. "Sometimes," I said, "people don't treat us fairly, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose respect and strength over anger." It was a lesson my own parents had never taught me, but now I was teaching it to my children. The next move was about visibility. I began inviting friends, colleagues, and mentors to small dinners and gatherings. Slowly, I built a network of support that wasn't based on family approval. My parents and sister noticed, of course. Invitations began arriving, subtly asking me to include them, but I was selective. I controlled who was part of my world and who remained outside. One evening, I received a call from my sister. "Your kids, they're so confident now. Too confident," she said, trying to sound concerned but clearly frustrated. "They're learning to value themselves," I replied, "something we all should do." She didn't respond. I knew the sting had landed exactly where I wanted. Meanwhile, I quietly began organizing legal safeguards. I consulted attorneys and financial advisors, ensuring that nothing, no property, no account, no inheritance, could be used against me or my children. Every document was reviewed, every clause analyzed. I wasn't just protecting my assets, I was building a fortress. Then came the holiday gathering. I approached it differently this time. Emma and Liam were seated at the head of the table, their places clearly marked. My sister's children were seated separately, politely but noticeably away. My parents tried to make comments, subtle jabs about seating and etiquette, but I simply smiled and redirected the conversation. Dinner began, and for the first time, my children were fully in control of their space. They ate confidently, asked questions, shared stories. My parents' eyes widened with a mix of disbelief and irritation. They had never seen this side of my kids before. After dinner, my sister tried to corner me privately. "You're being unreasonable," she whispered. "It's just a family meal." I turned to her calmly.
It's never just a meal when the pattern has been disrespect for years. This is about teaching them self-worth and setting boundaries, something you and Mom never did for me. Her lips pressed together. She didn't argue further. She knew I was right, and that realization scared her more than anything I could have said. Over the next few weeks, I implemented small, strategic moves to reinforce control. I began recording family interactions subtly, nothing illegal, just documentation of behaviors and words. Each slight, each condescending remark, each attempt at manipulation was noted. I wasn't planning to attack, I was planning to protect. At the same time, I expanded my professional life. I started a small consultancy that allowed me to work with clients who valued fairness, integrity, and respect. The success was quick and sustainable. Emma and Liam saw me working, planning, and achieving, and they learned the silent power of focus and determination. One evening, my father called. His tone was uncharacteristically careful. "We just want to be part of your life," he said. I paused, thinking of the countless times they had dismissed me. Then I replied, calmly, "I appreciate that, but part of my life now is teaching my children to respect themselves. That's non-negotiable. If you can honor that, then perhaps we can talk. If not, then we'll maintain distance." There was silence on the line. Finally, he hung up. That night, I reflected on the week. The subtle power shift was becoming clear. My family's control had eroded, and my children were thriving under my guidance. They laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and were no longer constrained by favoritism or manipulation. It was at that moment I realized revenge wasn't about anger or humiliation. It was about reclaiming control, protecting my children, and setting an example. My parents and sister underestimated me. They thought I was weak, but I had learned, and now I was teaching the next generation not to be weak. By the end of the chapter, a subtle but powerful truth had settled. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. My sister's jabs no longer landed, my parents' expectations no longer held power, and Emma and Liam knew without question that their mother would always stand for them. I smiled quietly that night, thinking of how far we had come. The table had turned, and the lessons were clear. Silence, strategy, and calm persistence could achieve more than anger ever could. And as I tucked the children into bed, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning."